Titanic's interesting because it's like, it definitely happened. People died. The motivation is the interesting thing. Like, why, if it was orchestrated, what would be someone's motivation?
So walk us through the Titanic. So I'd love to get like a story of each conspiracy theory. Give us the background.
What we were talking about before recording is there's like a history, there's a background. Like, it's not just like the Titanic sank.
Yeah.
The conspiracy theory would be,
and you can give us the history. I want you to feel the freedom to dive
I
in.
will, for sure, for sure. So like in the 19 teens, like 12, 13, whatever, powerful people, wealthy people were getting ready to start the Federal Reserve, world banking, all that stuff. JP Morgan, the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, like those type of people, which I don't know if you're familiar with that or not.
Vaguely.
Okay.
Yes.
So they were creating that, the Federal Reserve. Majority of the wealthy people, elites, whatever, were in favor of it. There were maybe 4 or 5 people who were very against it. And they were actually more wealthy than those other guys. They were all on the Titanic when it sank. JP Morgan was on the Titanic. He had a ticket, canceled. He gets off. Yes, it's time to drink the water. So he was going to go on the Titanic, the great unsinkable ship or whatever they called it. And you have these 3 or 4 other like super wealthy guys. JP Morgan owned the ship. He gets off, or owned like the line that the ship was, whatever. Fact checkers will cancel me on that.
Yeah, that's okay.
But yeah, so then these guys that opposed the Federal Reserve were on the Titanic. It sinks, they die, obviously. Horrible. It gets passed into law. Woodrow Wilson, I think, presented it to Congress. It happened over like their Christmas break, so there was like not everybody was there. As far as Congress goes, it gets passed, and then the Federal Reserve, which would be kind of like the, I don't know, overarching, that's kind of like the first instance when the United States kind of made its shift towards corporate, deep state, from my perspective. So that's kind of like the first domino to fall, was getting rid of these people on the Titanic, and then they could kind of take over the United States. So
wow. So basically, the theory is that JP Morgan just like killed his competition.
Yeah, essentially. And when you label something as like the great unsinkable ship and like all this stuff, like he probably lost a bunch of money from that, but then you go into like what he was able to gain, the control, the power, influence, all that stuff. So in his mind, it was worth it. But that was, they had that meeting at Jekyll Island, which is a pretty notorious location. I think it's off the coast of Georgia or South Carolina or something. But even that location, Jekyll Island, has a history of like paganism. Like when the settlers came over, like Jekyll Island was kind of like this haunted place. Really? So it's interesting that those people chose that location as like, we're going to take over the United States. This kind of gets into the...
hey, I'm following you. I'm following you. Yeah, so you just keep leading us.
With the conspiracy theory, there's like, usually there's some sort of human sacrifice that's involved.
Wow.
And this kind of gets into the weeds of it a little bit. And I don't want to derail. In conspiracy theory, there's like a line between like evil, but like, obvious control, money, whatever, as the influence. But then there's like the other side of it that's like pure evil, like, that it's, you kind of have to walk that line mentally. Like once you go into that headspace of like, everything is evil, everyone who's on TV has sold their soul. Like you can quickly kind of lose grip on reality. Yeah. So content will kind of come in and then I'll entertain it or not, but I try to live, rationally and not paranoid.
And that's a good quick segue point, because you got me very interested on what we were just talking about. But I do think that, the beautiful thing is that we believe God's in control.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. But what we're trying to do and what Andrew's done is he says, well, let's just look a little deeper than what we're taught in history books. Let's just look a little. Let's just what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And so tell me. Okay. So
Titanic or
yeah, let's continue.
Okay.
Well, let's continue. So they meet on this Jekyll Island,
yeah, they meet at Jekyll Island.
and you say there's a chance they're doing human sacrifices.
Not
on Jekyll
at
Island.
Jekyll, well, maybe, but I don't think it was happening like at Jekyll Island, and it wasn't. J.P. Morgan wasn't physically there. He had like a representative because these people don't want to be, you know,
Right.
if you had all of these people in one location, that could be, you know, a sketchy thing. But so they decided we're going to orchestrate the Federal Reserve, and by that we'll influence, control the most powerful, an ascending nation, because this is 1912, 13, whatever. So this is before or during the beginning of World War I. World War II hasn't happened yet, which is when the U.S. kind of made that step to a global power, like, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Jekyll Island, Federal Reserve, all of that, Titanic. And the interesting thing about the Titanic was there was a book that came out a few, like maybe like 10 years before the Titanic. The ship was called the Titan. It was called the Great Unsinkable. There's all these like similarities between this book that was written
before
like
the
1899 or something.
Weird.
And then the Titanic is 1912. So like, you know, 10, 13 years later. And then like the amount of deaths, the running into an iceberg, like all these things that match up. That's really hard you can't just be like, oh, okay, yeah, that was an accident. So either time travel's real, which is a separate conspiracy theory, or it was orchestrated. And something else with conspiracy theories, not to derail the Titanic conversation, but there's usually some form of like desensitization or like stuff that we'll watch in movies today is either desensitizing us or making us like comfortable with certain agendas or things that the elites or whomever might be pushing us towards. So, you know, they didn't have movies and stuff back then. Obviously, they had like movers or whatever they called them. But so books would be that version back then to release to the public to get people kind of used to that mindset or something happening. And then when it happens, it's like almost as if they were expecting it to happen. Subtle form of not like mind control, but like getting people comfortable with something horrible to happen. So.